Welcome to the fourth episode of Capacity Building Stories, a podcast brought to you by the Paris Commuting Capacity Buildings Network, or PCCB Network for short. We bring you the wealth of knowledge and experiences from network members to transform their capacity building efforts into valuable learning opportunities to drive more impactful climate action. I'm your host, Eva Costas, and today we delve into the pressing issue of loss and damage. This issue has been a live and contentious topic in UN climate negotiations for over 3 decades, hitting a historic breakthrough at COP27 with the establishment of the new Loss and Damage Fund. Join us as we explore the interlinkages between loss and damage and capacity building and learn about the important work of the Loss and Damage Youth Coalition, or LDYC.
In this episode, I will be sitting down with Ineza Grace Umuhoza, co-founder and global coordinator of the Loss and Damage Youth Coalition, to discuss in more detail the capacity building gaps and needs for averting, minimizing, and addressing loss and damage, and the capacity building efforts of the LDYC. So, hello Ineza, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Eva, for the invitation. I'm doing pretty much good today. And I enjoyed the sun in the morning, so it's going to be a very good day.
Definitely love the sun to put us in a good mood for the day. Would you like to just quickly introduce yourself in a few words to our speakers before we get started?
My names are Ineza Grace. I go by Ineza. I describe myself as an ecofeminist, impact-driven actor in the climate change sector, and I believe in the powerful role of sharing frontline voices, concern, and hopes in more efforts to achieve climate justice.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for that, and looking forward to delving into your work as the episode goes on. But yeah, as I mentioned, so today's theme of the episode is loss and damage and capacity building. And loss and damage is very much the issue of the moment, and it was the defining issue for COP27 with the agreement on the new Loss and Damage Fund. So it's a really big issue, but it's sort of a technical subject as well. So for the audience listening, what does loss and damage mean in the context of the UNFCCC?
Yes, that's a very good question. And to answer it, I'll use an example. So loss and damage is everything that happened beyond the ability of the community to adapt or mitigate. That is a kind of a language that they use to define. But in reality, when you hear a community in Rwanda, the recent event that happened in May, when out of nowhere, I'll say, we had to experience an excessive rainfall in 2 nights. And we had a community that were affected. We had more than 4,000 households affected. These include women and the children and infrastructure that have been destroyed. We do not have any kind of international response that is going to help the community in my country be able to address this impact on a very immediate manner, because everything that is there, let's say for example humanitarian aid, is going to be not driven to really act quicker as we want it to be. And then that is just a sense of how loss and damage is a series of extreme weather events that is happening at the very first rate, and putting the countries and the community who did less to really cause the greenhouse gas emissions, because the greenhouse gas emissions are the one responsible for climate change. But then they are the one who are at the front line experiencing this impact, and women, children, and young people are left behind. There's no really kind of a concrete solution of hope that is there, that is going to be able to help children who are migrating or who are being dropped out from school, and women to be able to have a sense of hope for a better future when this event is happening. So loss and damage is kind of capturing all those effects, and it kind of has like the economic and non-economic loss impact. So for example, if our country GDP has been used to create roads, and the hospitals and other public infrastructures, and all of them is being destroyed on the extent of intensive rainfall. So this is like economic burden that is also being put on countries who really did less. So that is a little bit of explaining what is loss and damage in reality, and saying that it is happening today is not something that is going to happen in the next 5 years, and it's happening now, and everyone everywhere is exposed, not only from the global south perspective, but also in the global north, because we have events in Germany, Belgium, and in the States where we have the communities who are experiencing this effect at a very, I would say like a very devastating rate.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. I mean, like you very well mentioned, it's one of the biggest, or if not the biggest, climate justice issue, and it really goes beyond the economic impacts that you mentioned, and it's people and loss of livelihoods, and loss and damage really affecting societies and communities and people, and also culture and heritage, which I'd love to ask you a little bit more about later. But beyond this, sort of legal or political definition, what does it actually mean to you? What does loss and damage mean to you, and what inspired you to be involved in or to work on loss and damage?
So for me, I would say like loss and damage is if I define it, it's going to be like the sense of defining if I have a future or not. And the reason why I was involved is because when I grew up, I wanted to be a pilot, because I was very good in mathematics, really wanted to travel, and I was always seeing like the big plane was just something that I wanted to really be able to conduct. And then after finishing high school, I saw on television, it was in 2013, a particular community in my country being forced to move from one area to another, and then on the news they will say that the community is being forced because of natural hazard that was happening. And on the television you can see women and children were the images of people who are moving, and it kind of reminded me of my personal experience. But our brain is having like a very good way of, I would say like a defense mechanism where the brain kind of like make you forget an event that happened to you until you see something similar. So when I saw those images on the television, I kind of remembered of my personal fear of waking up in the middle of the night because my mom had woke me up because of the intensive rainfall associated with wind destroyed my house ceiling, and my bedroom was a bit of a lake. I remember the panic I was feeling. So for me, seeing that this kind of thing is happening in 2013 and that other children were facing it, I kind of changed my goal. That's when I wanted to go to, like, what's the natural hazard? Why does the planet is responding the same way it is now? And in my university studies, that's when I discovered climate change. And I discovered also the fact that my country did less to really contribute to the greenhouse gas emissions, but we are the front line and we don't have any. We are trying to do our best, but we would like to do it much more better. So that's when I started my engagement, and in 2019, that's where I started following loss and damage, which is an item that is, I would say, like in the negotiation or in the process, it's a kind of toxic because no one wants to talk about anything that's going to be demanding the ownership of taking responsibility, because we know the cause, we know how the reality is, but then there's a kind of a lack of acknowledging that there's a need to change the draft or like the course of things. That's why it took 30 years to really have a decision on really addressing loss and damage. So for me, loss and damage means like that thing that is that item or like that cluster that's going to be able to define if I'm going to be having a future or not. And I can see it on my daily basis, but I don't want to see it in the future. So that's why I want to be engaged in anything and everything that can really help me to be part of the solution that's going to help others have a dream, especially young generation.
Oh, thank you so much. I think it was super inspiring to hear about your journey and what really inspired you to be involved in loss and damage. And like you very well mentioned at this point, of course, every nation and everyone will be affected by loss and damage, but sadly the effects are distributed unequally. And this is just a clear example of loss and damage being a climate justice issue, and its impacts being distributed unequally to developing countries, but also to the younger generation, and how you're working to fight that. So definitely be hearing more about your work later on. But hopefully, now that you've provided a bit of a definition of what loss and damage means, I'd like to ask you a little bit if you could tell us a bit more about the current status quo of loss and damage and what it looks like right now in the climate action landscape.
That's a very good question, and I will try to respond not being like using, I would say not really technical words. So currently, loss and damage, it has like that sense of being a center of attention now, because from the Paris Agreement, when it has its own agenda item, people were still not really ready to talk about it, especially on the addressing part. And I feel like from COP27, that is where now people are ready to talk about it, and they know that we are watching, because that's why when the decision was made on the establishment of the fund, there was also like this kind of a way of really helping operationalization of the fund to be as quick as possible. So currently, what we are looking forward for is the fund to be operationalized at COP28. It's going to be very hard, because we want it to be operationalized in a manner that is not going to be using the business as usual, especially within this global process, because we know part of the definition or part of examples people are putting forward, they want to maybe make argument that we can increase adaptation finance and minimize the cost of loss and damage in the future, which is okay. But that is not going to happen, because the ability of accessing adaptation finance, especially from developing country, is not the same. Is not equally distributed. So that's why we need really different ways of defining the accessibility of the loss and damage finance. And the other kind of reality of how this is going is that I think for me, for example, I really do not want to see the loss and damage finance be another burden for developing country that is going to be increasing like the debts or any kind of pressure they are having, because we've been experiencing loss and damage since the discovering of oil in 1990, whatever. I don't remember the right year. And our governments, our people, been trying to cope with the climate change impact since that time. But every data, every example we want to put forward, we are being challenged by some. I don't know how to say it, but we are being challenged with the fact that they want to impose like a new modality of access. And we already know what's not working. We already know what the already existing modality is putting. How can I say, it's not facilitating us to really be climate actors at the scope we need. And the finance that is also available does not meet the needs of what we are having. So this finance should be, the new finance, especially for loss and damage, should be looking on that really huge spectrum and taking deep consideration from the voices of the front-end community, because they are the one who has been facing this issue. They have data, they have trust, it make it easier. Also, like these loss and damage finance need to trust and give the key on the operationalization or the modalities of institutional arrangement to the developing countryside, because they're the ones who are expert in dealing with this issue. They're the ones who can really pass the good way of how this should be looking next. So I don't know if I answered.
No, absolutely. I think you already covered a lot of things that I was hoping that you would address throughout the episode. And I mean, clearly, of course, loss and damage has been getting a lot of attraction in the past years, but like you mentioned, it's been an issue that has been ongoing since the dawn of time pretty much, but now it's getting this attraction, and clearly, the increase for financing loss and damage is clear. But I'm interested to know, given that this is an episode on loss and damage and capacity building, how does capacity building fit into the picture, and how is loss and damage linked to capacity building? What are the most pressing capacity building gaps and needs for addressing the fullest spectrum of loss and damage? And would just love to hear what you have to say about that.
There's a link of capacity building with loss and damage, especially when you look on, for example, items or like initiatives such as the Santiago Network on loss and damage, where it's then to get to catalyze like the technical assistance that is going to help countries being able to communicate and express their need to address loss and damage. So in terms of really defining, for example, a country national plan on, or like a state of play of a country on loss and damage, what kind of finance, what's the finance gap, what's the finance gap, what the finance needs, what's the impact that's happening, how future temperature rise is going to be affect the country and put loss and damage, maybe the need to address loss and damage at the next level. So those kind of ability to really learn those skills on the national level, so that is really important, because a lot of time in my mind, or like how people frame it, they say a lot of information on how loss and damage being able to be addressed within the country or community is within the community, because they're the ones who know exactly kind of they have the data. But then for the community to be able to know how they can feed their data into a national strategy, that's where a capacity building for loss and damage is needed. But when you look on the addressing part, for me, I'm like, addressing is really clear. Community, let's say we have a road that has been destroyed. Addressing simply means reconstructing the same road in a short time, without really causing social instability or distress within the community. So addressing part, I would say like there's really less need for capacity, but on the road to the addressing, that's where the capacity building is needed so that we can create a good number of research, especially from developing countries, that is going to be able to make a case for the non-economic and economic losses and damage that is happening. And it kind of also in understanding what can be the good state of actors who are ready to be part of the journey. So that would be the role. The way I see like the capacity building can sit, but in the addressing, it's just clear we just need finance to be able to do A, B, C, D, E.
Thanks so much for that, and for highlighting again the pressing need for finance. So when it comes to averting and minimizing, I think you already mentioned the role of sort of capacity building and technical assistance. And at the end of the day, it's really of bringing the means of implementation together, finance, tech, and capacity building to address, avert, and minimize loss and damage. But you mentioned as well the importance of really community efforts on the ground, and then really feeding into international strategies. So with addressing aside, how can capacity building support in averting and minimizing losses and damages?
Minimizing loss and damage, that's mitigation. So which means if there's going to be like new technology on carbon removal, keeping the 1.5 alive, reducing the emission, to renewable energy technology. So that's where it can fit, and also minimizing loss and damage. This is adaptation. So any skills that is going to help the community be able to understand how they can keep their economic, social life standards, regardless of how the climate is changing in their neighborhood, is important. And if we link it with also trying to ensure that especially the young generation are equipped with the tools to understand all of these issues at a very younger age. That's why I like to follow anything that is happening in the Action Climate Empowerment, which is for me, because I feel like that's the opportunity where the new generation, the younger generation, and the next generation has the opportunity to be included in understanding what's the decision that being made on their future and how they can be active stakeholders. So if there's a way to link those two, like those three, like averting, minimizing, and action climate of empowerment together, I think that's going to be like one way to really help the addressing part when it's going to be coming in place. And also the other thing is institutional capacity building for youth-led organization is also important, because youth-led organizations are taking actions on the ground. But most of the time, people tend to think that we are not experts. We are young people, we're doing it as a hobby. But what they are failing to capture is that we are doing the work that we're doing because we understand how much we have to lose. I have a friend of mine, I'm going to share her story, but she was like, the reason why she gets involved in the climate change sector, she grew up seeing a butterfly in her neighborhood. But after a few years, she realized that there was no longer butterfly. And that's the reason because she was like, if I don't protect the environment, my children would be able to see butterflies at all. So that is because we understand what we have to lose in a way.
That was extremely helpful, and I think you've already touched on a couple of points that I wanted to ask you about, and bringing in sort of the younger generation into the conversation. I think one of the objectives of the Loss and Damage Youth Coalition at the end of the day is building capacity of global youth on loss and damage, and you very well showed the really the importance of this, but also on the need for institutional capacity for youth-led organizations, because I mean, beyond of course youth needing capacity building, they're capacity builders themselves, and so supporting, or rather enabling that is really key. So tell me, why is building capacity of the global youth and loss and damage important for the LDYC, and what are some of the projects or the different capacity building efforts that you're doing on this?
So the Loss and Damage Youth Coalition started from a discussion among young people when we were like, ooh, our planet is dying and our leaders are giving us empty promises, which is, I feel like now it's clear that leaders are giving us empty promises. But then we didn't want to be in the part of blaming. We wanted to be part of a solution. And we understood that the very first to do is to hold leaders accountable in their own space. And because the UNFCCC is kind of I'll say, for the I know, it's like that space where you can really talk about loss and damage clearly, because it's a term that is pretty much accepted within this context. But then for us, we understood that we were like a team of less than 10 young people from developed and developing countries. And then we understood that the very first to do is to really understand what is loss and damage, what is the state of play in the decision-making process, and what is our message. So with that understanding, that's where we started with having working groups. So our work within the coalitions within working group. So we have the training working group, which is really trying to ensure that every young person who speak French, English, and we are trying also to speak Spanish, we have French, English, Spanish, and we're trying to see other languages that we can incorporate. They can have easily accessible information on what is loss and damage. So we conduct trainings, and these trainings are online or in person, and we cover those three questions. We put it forward, and then we have the advocacy. The advocacy, which is really important because it serves as a way to really give our state of, let's say, like our grading. Like we are able to grade if a particular presidency or the process is putting our need and concern at the center. So we send open letters and we do meet with board leaders to really make sure we are stating our demand. No one is speaking on our behalf. We're speaking on our own behalf because we have our voices and we respect and we know that each voices matter, hence ours also matter. And then from the fact also that we were dealing with loss and damage, as you know, when you studied, you were like, loss and damage is a topic that not everyone really understand. We have a component of storytelling where we allow each young person, wherever you are located, to come and talk about what is loss and damage to you. What does that mean? How should addressing loss and damage look within your community, within your context? And they share their story using vlogs, video, or photograph, any kind of means that they wish. And all of that really allowed us to be able to be in the space, increase the ability of young people to be inside and outside the UNSCC process, to understand how they can make position cases that is going to allow our ability to have a future, because we understand that we don't have any other planet B, we have only planet A. So our only way is to really ensure that we're able to take active, concrete actions today, and we also trying to do with different range of partners. And now we are so happy in the way that we're also able to fund 11 youth-driven action on addressing loss and damage. This was the work done alongside one of our funders from the CJRF. It was the first time ever that youth were being able to be trusted, I would say, like to be able to receive funding to take action addressing loss and damage within their community. And I feel like it's a process that we are learning, but when we see people who are able to take the risk with us and trust us, we are able to do some concrete work together.
For that's super inspiring and great how you bring, training, advocacy, and storytelling all into the same place. And especially in storytelling, it definitely tends to be underlooked sometimes, but storytelling is definitely such a capacity building tool, and the way that people can sort of really take control of their own narratives and share their stories and really inspire change and action and amongst others. And this is exactly what we're trying to do by having you on this episode and hearing about your journey. So thanks so much again for that. But no, you also mentioned partnerships as well, and especially considering that loss and damage is such a, it very much varies on the context of the country and the communities. So how do you go about mobilizing such a global coalition that is the Loss and Damage Youth Coalition, especially youth from both the global north and the global south, to take part on loss and damage? Because you know that the PCCB network is made out of different capacity building stakeholders that are both party and non-party stakeholders. So I'm hoping to gain some insider lessons from the coalition and see how we can do the same with the network.
So I would say it's all rooted in how we started, in a way, because we started with the sense of standing together in global solidarity and advancing the voice for the most vulnerable. And for me, I believe that everyone understands that we are all human, we are all connected. And then that sense of really be part of a community that is pushing forward a common goal, because we have common goals. For example, if we currently have our SB demands that is going to be shared on the 10th of June. But even if it's a work that is being done by the advocacy working group, they're the one who leads it for it. But we are standing together as a coalition made by 800, currently we are 800 members from more than 70 countries behind that voice, because we understand that it's our concern, it's our hope, and it's something that we want to see change. So, and also increasing the sense of ownership, which is we're still trying to work on, because we are learning by doing. But one thing that I would say is that we like to jump on risk, and just because we know we don't have any time to learn how to do it better, we just have to do it and learn to do it better while we are doing it. And so far it's been working in a pretty much good way. But I would say everything lies on the fact that we as youth, we understand that we are standing together as one. We don't see it, we don't see loss and damage as a different issue that's going to be maybe needing addressing in the global south, not in the global north, but we see it as a common issue, and we acknowledge that we need addressing on all part of the world, but special allocation should be from those who've been experiencing this impact for a longer time, who are located in the global south. But we don't undermine the fact that we also have to address it in the global north.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for that. And I think at the end of the day, it's all about promoting. I mean, yeah, it's really all about solidarity too, and promoting these inclusive and participatory approaches. And you mentioned ownership too, and especially recipient ownership when it comes to receiving autonomy and decision making power of those that are most affected. But at the end of the day, like you mentioned, it's really affecting all of us.
Yes, yeah. I was going to say, like, we also have this saying in the coalition where we're like, loss and damage with coalition is the voice of many, to really highlight the fact, even if I am the one speaking here, I am one voice out of the many. And I have story from Rwanda, but I have colleagues in Zanzibar or in Philippines who have their voices also.
Thanks so much for that. Yeah, voices of many, and really speaking here as you, but really representing all the 800 members that make up the coalition behind you. Lovely. Thanks so much for that. And yeah, we're about to wrap the episode up. So tell our listeners a little bit of how they can be involved in the work of the Loss and Damage Youth Coalition.
You can join us by following us on Twitter. That's where we are much more active. In a way, but you can also find us on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and you can sign up on our website mailing list, and then you can have update of when a training is coming up, when a story has been published, or when we need actions such as signing up our open letter. And you can join on individual or our institution level, so we kind of have a way to work on those two fronts.
Thank you so much. And now, just to really wrap this up, we started off with the definition of loss and damage, and you provided us a bit of an overview of the current landscape, and then we looked into capacity building and the different gaps and needs, and then the work that you're doing and how you're engaging youth and building their capacities, but also the other way around, how youth are sort of flipping around the conversation, telling their stories and mobilizing other youth and building the capacities of others, and sort of promoting these advocacy and outreach efforts on loss and damage. So now, just to ask you a bit of a forward-looking question, we already spoke that, of course, COP27 marked the breakthrough of the agreement on the loss and damage fund, but there's so much more that still needs to be done, especially when it comes to operationalizing it and around it. So what are your expectations for COP28 regarding the fund, but also when it comes to capacity building and loss and damage, but also youth?
My expectation for COP28 is that it's going to be established and operationalized in a manner that is going to be new, additional, accessible, and grant-based to allow developing country, frontline community to be able to receive adequate financial resources to address the impact of loss and damage. And then also in the climate finance, there should be really a room on talking about loss and damage finance in the commitment that's going to be happening in the future, because I feel like this is an opportunity to include it. And for the capacity building, I would say that it's going to be linked with the ability really to take stock of all the process that is really lagging. Like there might be a way to create a kind of a toolkit that can allow young generation or today youth to know where should they start in being climate actors, because we are past the time of calling everyone to be, come be a climate actor, be a climate advocate, be a climate voice. I think we are almost past that line. We need to really showcase, take action. This is how you should do. And I feel like if there might be a way to have, I don't know how it can happen, but it's sort of a really clear way to help people know how they can be climate action takers, stakeholders on the grassroots community, on the national, regional, international level. That will mark a change, and I feel like that would be like a good way forward in my understanding.
And with that, I think that's a great way to leave it off, as finding ways for you to really be climate change action takers. So again, thank you so much for that. Thank you for our listeners and for listening to the Capacity Building Stories, a podcast by the PCCB Network. It's been lovely talking to you, Ineza, and it's been really eye-opening and inspiring to hear about your work and your journey. And thank you again for providing us a great overview of loss and damage under the UCCC more broadly, but also for giving us that insight into the people and how loss and damage really goes beyond the economic impacts, but this sort of human aspect of loss and damage. Thank you again for everything. We hope dear listeners enjoyed, and we'll see you on the next episode.